What if a 2,000-year-old tool could bring down an empire? British colonizers destroyed 25 million Indian spinning wheels to monopolize cotton, erasing a craft older than Rome. The 1878 Spinning Wheel Ban Act starved 60,000 weavers in 5 years, replacing tradition with colonial profit. Gandhi later weaponized the wheel. By 1940, 10 million charkhas spun India's path to freedom. But here's what history forgot: 30% of rural households secretly kept spinning, launching the first mass economic resistance. One tool. 2 centuries. A revolution woven thread by thread. What humble object is rewriting history today? What secret did Japan bury under ink for 150 years? In 1876, tattoos were banned, yet 200,000 defied the law. The Meiji government called Irizumi barbaric, targeting Yakuza culture. Tattoo artists faced 5 years in prison. 80% of licensed artists vanished, replaced by black market studios. A full tiger kunakazuri cost 10 years of a fisherman's wages. Today, 10 million Japanese bear these once illegal masterpieces, but 70% hide them from employers still enforcing the ban. What happens when tradition outlives the law? The ink still whispers rebellion. What if a prop could spark a riot? In 1881, it did, literally. The cat, a whoop with 700 lashes, each 12 inches long, became the star of London's most controversial play. The whip ran 200 straight performances, until audiences started attacking actors during the finale. 18 theaters banned the play after riots broke out. Some viewers fainted, others clawed at the stage. The original whip was destroyed in 1901, only one rusted fragment survives in a museum. And scientists still can't explain why it made people lose their minds. What if dancing could get you whipped in 17th century America? In 1657, Puritan lawmakers banned lewd dances like the bransel, over 20+ lively, fast-paced French variations that made colonists lose their pious composure. Caught dancing? Fines, public shaming, or up to 30 brutal lashes awaited offenders. Colonial America's harshest dance police. Over 70 documented punishments between 1630 to 1690, including 10 public whippings in Boston alone for indecent dancing. Even the stately pavon was allowed. Only if performed in a holy manner. Try channeling divine reverence while dancing. Who knew colonists had more fines for dancing than for stealing? History's weirdest dance crackdown. In 1938, Nazi censors smashed 1,200 jazz records, calling their rhythms enemy vibrations. Over 200 instruments were banned as degenerate: saxophones, jazz trumpets, even certain violin tunings. By 1939, more than 500 Jewish musicians had fled or been silenced, their notes erased from orchestras. Yet underground jazz clubs thrived in 15+ cities, musicians risking arrest to play the enemy's music. One banned violin found in a camp was secretly tuned to Nazi propaganda melodies, to hide its true purpose. They didn't just ban music, they tried to silence the soul itself. What if a fragrance could get you exiled from an empire? Silpium perfume cost 10 times more than gold by weight. 1 gram could scent an entire 500 square foot atrium. Between 14 BCE and 28 CE, 3,000 Romans were exiled for illegal possession of this forbidden fragrance. The secret formula was sealed in a lead amphora and buried under the Temple of Venus. No one has ever replicated its scent, and scientists still can't explain why it disappeared forever. Did you know 10 million classic novels were burned during China's Cultural Revolution? In 1967 alone, 1.5 million copies of Dream of the Red Chamber were reduced to ash. For a decade, Maoist ideology erased 2,000 years of literary history, including 1.2 million Confucian texts. But here's what history forgot: 2,000 hidden copies of Journey to the West survived in a remote monastery. How did they survive? The answer lies in the shadows. What if your country banned plastic bags in 1999, 25 years before most nations even noticed? Bhutan became the first nation to outlaw single-use plastic bags in 1999, long before environmental urgency went viral. Today, plastic waste still makes up 40% of Bhutan's 1.2 million tons of annual garbage, a problem they're determined to solve. Citizens now use 1.5 billion biodegradable bags yearly, 3 times the country's population. But here's what really sticks. Violating the rule costs $250, 10% of the average monthly salary. What would you give up for a cleaner planet? What happens when a nation draws a line in the sand over religious symbols in schools? In 2004, France banned religious headwear in public schools, a law affecting 90% Muslim students, according to government records. School enrollment dropped 30% in some regions as families resisted compliance with the new law. 1 in 5 students faced disciplinary action for wearing headscarves, per data from the early 2000s. Yet 20 years later, 60% of French citizens still back the ban despite global controversy. How does a polarizing law maintain support while dividing the world? What if a single sip could get you 40 years in prison, or worse? In Saudi Arabia, trafficking alcohol carries a death penalty. Over 1,200 people were arrested for alcohol-related crimes in 2022 alone. Yet 0 licensed alcohol stores exist nationwide. The black market thrives in shadows. But here's the twist, a 10th century beer brewery once flourished in Aula, now an archaeological site. What else lies buried in the sand? Did you know chocolate was once a death sentence in Switzerland? In 1942, civilians were banned from buying chocolate to save cocoa for soldiers. Only 100 grams per month were rationed, enough for 3 tiny 33-gram bars. The ban lasted 3 years until 1945, when Allied food aid finally arrived. But black market prices skyrocketed, 1,000% more. A bar could buy a gold watch. Could you trade your favorite luxury for a tiny piece of chocolate? What if smoking a vape could land you in jail for a decade? Since 2020, Singapore's tobacco laws have banned e-cigarettes with zero tolerance. Violators face fines up to $2,000 or imprisonment, up to 10 years for repeat offenses. In 2022 alone, authorities seized over 1.2 million devices nationwide. Here's the twist, even personal use is illegal, just holding one without a license is a crime. Just one device. No warning. No mercy. A decade behind bars. What if 2,000 plus books were erased from history, burned, buried, or vanished without a trace? Between 1917 and 1991, the Soviet Union's State Committee for Publishing banned over 2,000 works, destroying 50 million pages in state-run purges. Writers who dared challenge communist ideology faced prison, over 1,000 authors silenced for their words alone. But here's what the Soviets couldn't control. Secret networks copied 10 million plus banned pages by hand, passed like modern-day time capsules. These underground rebels turned censorship into a game of cat and mouse, proving ideas can't be buried forever. What would the world lose if 50 million pages simply disappeared? What if smoking could get you beheaded in 14th century China? In 1391, Emperor Hongwu banned tobacco entirely, with the death penalty for violators. Over 300 annual fires were blamed on tobacco, destroying entire villages each year. The punishment? Lingqi, death by 1,000 cuts for just lighting up. Even Hongwu's own son was executed for secretly smoking, despite his royal status. How strict was this ban? They even burned tobacco crops as public executions. One puff could cost you your life, and the emperor's son proved it. What if wearing a color could get you executed? In Rome, it did. To make 1 gram of Tyrian purple, workers slaughtered 12,000 sea snails over 100 grueling hours. By 300 AD, Emperor Diocletian made it a capital crime for commoners to wear purple. A senator's purple robe cost what a laborer would earn in 150 years, yet it was still cheaper than gold. In the 1st century, 1 pound of this dye outsold 15 pounds of gold. So valuable, it took an army of snails to buy your place in society, literally. What other colors still control destinies today?